This product is not yet rated.
We begin the Bioshock 2 podcast series by talking with two key figures shaping the future of the game. Jordan Thomas, creative director at 2K Marin, and Hogarth de la Plante, lead environment artist. Both veterans to the Bioshock franchise, they worked on the first game in Boston and moved to California in 2008 to start the new studio and begin work on the much-anticipated sequel. To start, I asked them to give me a rundown of their job descriptions, and their answers gave me much more than simple insight into what they do.
I'm the project's creative director. That kind of means executive hand waver. I ask for stuff and whine when it isn't quite right.
I'm the lead environment artist on Bioshock 2. Basically, that means that I'm in charge of kind of architecture and lighting and making sure that the levels of the game get built out and look awesome.
Jordan also told me a bit more about the team building Bioshock, one that spans, literally, the entire globe. The group consists of both people who have been with the franchise since Bioshock 1 was still being built, to those who probably waited in line on opening day to buy the game, and now are getting a chance to work on it.
There was an original group of us that came over from 2K Boston, and all of those folks worked on the original game. And Bioshock 2 is also being worked on by 2K Australia, and many of those guys were critical to Bioshock 1, and they have returned for the second game. And then since then, we have been hiring a bunch of talented folks out of the Bay Area, some of whom are ex-film folks, like especially in the concept arena, and some of them are veterans of the many talented studios that are out here. The team is frankly, we're very proud of them, and we've had to build 2K Marin more or less from scratch. Hoagie and I were part of that original group, and the team is led by Alyssa Finley, who is the project lead of Bioshock 1 and who essentially seeded this new studio.
Bioshock came on the scene in August of 2007 and won a slew of awards and praise from the press and gamers worldwide. The story, setting, and mystery of Bioshock were profound and fresh, and when a sequel was announced, many agreed that 2K Marin would have some big shoes to fill when creating the next game of the series. As the mind creating the next chapter of Rapture's history, I asked Jordan to tell me what Bioshock 2 was all about.
First and foremost, Bioshock 2 is an attempt to bring new mystery to Rapture. So the story begins in the late 60s, and the player takes on the role of the very first Big Daddy. So Big Daddies are these kind of lumbering, powerful guardian characters that were present in the world of Rapture. And this time you take on the role of the first one, this kind of prototype who has been sort of cut loose and given free will and is able to make use of plasmids. And plasmids are these sort of genetic superpowers that allow the player character to evolve and grow over the course of the game. And so the game sort of begins with a mystery, like who am I and how did I get here? And from there you start build relationships with the characters that are surrounding that are still alive in Rapture. And by working with them, you can discover not only what happened to you, but you sort of work toward an escape. But if you have played it, then you get to sort of experience new locations and new sort of narrative that's embedded in this sort of sprawling, failed utopia at the bottom of the sea.
Hogarth, called Hoagie by everyone in the studio, also had his own take on what Bioshock 2 is about, and how he is trying to reach both the gamer who has traversed Rapture many a time and the player who has never heard the word Bioshock before.
For players familiar with Bioshock, a reintroduction to the environment of Rapture, which is the city that Andrew Ryan created under the Atlantic Ocean. So it's a reintroduction for them, and we're trying to figure out how to bring new narrative elements to the location of Rapture to make it an interesting place to play through another Bioshock title. For people who haven't played the game yet, they will get to learn about Rapture and who built it and why it's there and the events that have transpired in its 30 some odd year history. The first game we saw part of Rapture, and now we're seeing parts that we haven't seen before yet.
One of the questions I heard most frequently among gamers after the announcement of Bioshock was, why a sequel? Wasn't Bioshock enough? And in part, that question made sense to me. Bioshock was a game with a beginning, a middle, and end. No cliffhanger needed for something else. It seemed that Jordan, Hoagie, and all of 2K Marin had asked the same questions, or quite likely, read the same gamer comments, when approaching the story of Bioshock 2.
Sequels are all about expectation, and Bioshock is a series that we believe everybody thinks of as a very different animal from the next guy. And so the process began with where do you go with this? How do you bring people back to an experience and terrify them and shock them in a way that they're not expecting, but also fulfill the many expectations that they're projecting onto it.
Yeah, I think the way I've put it in various press demos is that we sort of have the framework of Rapture in place, and we have some of the ideology that Rapture was constructed with, that Andrew Ryan constructed it with, and then we have the sort of new framework of the new narrative that gets layered on top of that actual architecture. Not literally the same locations, but the idea of the city. And we're just trying to shift players' perspective in a bunch of ways to kind of keep that content fresh, but have it take place in the familiar and beloved environment of Rapture under the water.
Writing and building a video game can be likened to a novel, a comic, or a film. Like those other mediums, when creating a game, the developers have to think about more than just the gameplay, but about the story, the world, the ideas they want to convey, and the style in which they want to express them. For many, video games go further than any book or film can in allowing a person to step into another world and imagine themselves in a place entirely other than the one they live in. For Jordan and Hoagie, they had some important stuff they wanted to continue from Bioshock 1, as well as new areas they hadn't explored before.
Just the idea that we knew that it was going to be awesome to come back to Rapture, but how do we, make sure that is going to be really awesome for an audience who's already been there? So that was sort of me working on the environment, and that's been my primary challenge. And I think we're doing a great job of making it fresh and mysterious and awesome again. I think there are some thematic hallmarks of the Bioshock title that it's interesting working with a different creative director this time around. It's interesting to see what Jordan pulls out of the world of Bioshock that he sort of fixates on as the interesting things, as opposed to Ken when we worked on it the last time around. And so there still is the kind of the sort of background and backdrop of the objectivist utopia that was what Ken thought was so fascinating about that world. But now we've got that in the background, and now Jordan's sort of adding on top of that the things that he thinks are interesting about the characters in the world, and what Adam does to them, and the power struggles that happen down there. So I think it's just really interesting anyway for me working on it to build on it that way.
For me, there on the one hand, the new mystery comment that we've now managed to plug a few times around is something that I feel like extends into the philosophy of Rapture, and that coming back to Bioshock means that you need to be introduced to new ideas. And so Hoagie was talking about some of the things I'm interested, the nerdy stuff that I dig about Rapture. But I also feel that while we can't go in deep because it would spoil the plot, I also feel that it's important that if you come to Bioshock 2, that you get exposed to schools of thought that we didn't touch on in Bioshock 1, and that are interesting contrasts to objectivism. And so some of our characters will be ideologues like Andrew Ryan was for Bioshock 1. But have a very different point of view. And then on the gameplay front, I did feel like in Bioshock 1 we managed to bring some very interesting choices to the first person shooter, and my feeling this time around is that we need to increase that expressivity to when you decide to be the fire guy or the electricity guy, that over the course of the game, rather than just like zapping a little harder or lasting a little longer, or really just keeping up with the Joneses of the splicers that you're meeting along the way, you're actually your tactics are changing. You're gaining new usages and learning to pull off the bank shot and the sort of Rube Goldbergian kind of trick shots that people really tend to dig. And furthermore, that your Big Daddy weapons, that you're kind of evolving those throughout the game. So by the end, you've really rolled your own shooter. By the end, you're playing an entity that did not exist at first, and that is wholly yours.